I'm Frances Degen Horowitz, President of the City University Graduate School and University Center. Welcome to Women, a program for and about us. I'm delighted to welcome three women whose lives' work brings so much joy. They inspire children and adults to make the arts as important as breathing in their lives. Mezzo-soprano Betty Allen is president of the Harlem School of the Arts, where children and adults come together and learn together. She's a teacher at the Curtis and Manhattan Music at Schools, a trustee of Carnegie Hall and the Lincoln Center Chamber Society. Catherine Williams is the associate director of the Lincoln Center Institute, a think tank of aesthetics for teachers to learn how to inspire their students. And musician Phyllis Susan is Director of Education for Carnegie Hall. In 1985, Carnegie Hall instituted a program of in-school workshops, concerts, and teacher training. Three women of the arts and in the business of educating children about music and performance. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Betty, you're a mezzo-soprano. Phyllis, you were a harp player, and Catherine, you were a dancer. Three women performers. How did you come to be educators?
Well, almost like everything I've ever done, it was purely by accident and by someone else's idea. I never set out to become a teacher. Somebody convinced me that maybe I could do it, which is a good way to fall into a situation. But I'm sure that singing is a very peculiar thing. The instrument is inside the body, and it's extremely difficult to tell somebody how to sing. And I was always afraid of damaging someone, so I wasn't really sure I could do it well. And so when I came to the art of teaching singers, I was very careful and very, perhaps had a lot of trepidation as to what I might do inadvertently to someone. But I found that common sense helped me a great deal, and that what I had learned as my own teacher taught me, and what she looked for in me was something I began to see I should look for in my students, and that's really how I came to teach.
Phyllis?
Well, I got into this. My mother was a teacher, my sister is a teacher, but I went to Manhattan School of Music and said, no, I'm not going to be a classroom teacher, I want to be a performer, and I was very lucky about that. But after I joined the Pittsburgh Symphony in 1966, I married a neurosurgeon in 1969, and he wanted to go sailing on weekends. He could finally do that. So somehow or another, the sailing didn't work out with performances on weekends, and so I retired from the orchestra, and I found myself at loose ends. And I talked with Marie Mazel, Lauren's mother, in Pittsburgh, who had a youth orchestra, and they served students who were high school and college age. And she said, you know, there's a real need for a youth orchestra to serve younger students. Why don't you start one? And I said, okay. So I did. And I founded the Three Rivers Young People's Orchestras in 1974, which is now 21 years old. And I loved it. And I continued to play, and I subbed with the orchestra and so forth. But I found that more and more my energy was directed in building this organization to serve young people and to give them a place to be normal on weekends, because they practiced and they worked. You know, they were very dedicated, disciplined kids, smart kids. And they didn't carry violent cases to school, because that's not what you did, and probably still don't do in lots of ways. And so it was a great haven for them. And we started master classes and all kinds of things using Pittsburgh Symphony people and guest artists. And I just took to it like a duck to water, and went from there. Then I went to the Philadelphia Orchestra in 1988 to be the director of education, and then I came here on December 1st. So I'm in it, and I love it.
Catherine?
I had decided when I was about 5 I wanted to be a performer and a dancer, and then discovered that one could major in this in college. So I was able to get the college education as well as train myself to be a performer. But while in college, I did take a course taught by someone that placed us in a local public school teaching dance with children. And I began to think about the possibility of including that in my career. And after graduation, I had the great good fortune and honor to be a part of the National Endowment for the Arts Dance Movement Specialist Program, and began then touring internationally across, not internationally, nationally across the United States with dance residencies, but not only teaching, so that I was also able to perform. So in my development as a choreographer and a performer, I was able to work on both sides of my career. One thing led to another, and I continued to value the teaching aspect of my career and my commitment to the arts and education as a performer, as a choreographer, as an artist. And then as my joints began to ache and moan and groan and the pliés became a little stiffer, I began to make a slow transition out of the active performing career and found myself dedicating more and more of my time to the arts and education.
Do any of you miss performance?
I think what I do in that sense, I still try to keep my scales going and that sort of thing, but I miss it a little bit, but I'm so pleased to have had that experience in order to bring to the table the other, to make things work and to build environments where performers can have an opportunity to share their work with students. So that I don't miss it so much that I would give up what I'm doing.
I have to say that I don't miss it now. The first year when I said I wasn't going to sing anymore, I was absolutely horrible. I was as mean as a snake. You could have killed me. I wouldn't have rejoiced in anybody's pleasure, in anybody's performing or singing. I could not be civil about it to anybody. But after that year, I worked it out of my system and decided that I could enjoy other people very much and didn't miss it. I don't sit and moan and groan about it, and I really don't miss it. I think that what I did, I had a very wonderful time, at a wonderful time in my life, and that was very special, and I don't regret that I don't have it anymore, but I'm happy I had it.
Yeah. I feel very similarly. I recently found myself sitting at Westbeth watching a young Juilliard graduate, her premiere, her New York premiere, and all of a sudden I remembered 20 years ago, I was on that stage making my New York premiere. And it was as if I was part of a cycle, and I became quite driven with a passion to do what I could to help young artists have their moments, because it's all part of the cycle, and you want to do what you can so that those moments for young artists to be on the stage.
Well, you like to pass
and
it
to make
along.
their art.
You really do like to
Giving
pass.
back.
And what bothers me is when I see people teach. And singing, again, as I said, is so terrible because you can't touch the vocal cords. You can't find the voice. It's not like somebody can pick up your foot and really put it in proper position. Somebody can really put your hands on that harp and tell you what to do. But nobody can reach in your throat and figure out what's going on. It's a matter of the words and your breath and all these intangibles that you can't put your finger on. And you are so irritated with people who don't tell people truthfully what their proper place is at this moment and what they should do, that you get exasperated because you want somebody to be honest with them. You don't want people just lying to them or not telling them or not making them reach a goal that they could reach or give them really a higher level than they would appreciate, And that's what bothers me. I want people to be more stringent. I want people to make them work harder. I want them to do the very best they can.
But I think teaching makes you a better performer. Because I know when I was teaching harp privately, I would have to then think through so many of the methods and things that I'd learned or had become very easy and natural for me. And yet I was trying to transfer the knowledge in my head and experience into somebody else's head. And that's what teaching is all about. What is going to turn the light bulb on?
Yes.
And how many different ways are you going to go at this subject to get that light bulb turned on?
But
and
isn't that what's really wrong with a lot of people? Because they think there's only one way to do something, and they're kind of inflexible, and that there are all those children out there that nobody's reaching, and maybe those are the children that the arts can reach in some way and bring them to education and bring them to a proper understanding of what they can do. If a teacher says, no, this is my way and this is the only way this will be done, then you have really a terrible, you foreshorten people's chances, and you haven't given them the opportunity to see that there is another way to reach this goal, or there is a possibility for you to do better than you think.
But now, as educators, you bring a performance background to education. How do you sort out, as educators, the fact that in bringing the arts to children, most children are not ultimately going to be great artists or great performers? Is there a frustration for you as performers coming
Doesn't
into
matter.
education?
It doesn't matter.
In no way.
No.
And perhaps either because of my own personal philosophy about how important it is to bring those kinds of experiences to people. I found the Institute, or the Institute found me, but the Lincoln Center Institute approach to working in the arts and education very much is giving people experiences in the arts by activities where they are dealing with the elements of the art form, but not for the purpose of learning the perfect plie or creating the perfect scale, but rather understanding something about how the elements of the art form went together. So you had introduced the Institute as a think tank. Very much we talk about the thinking processes that artists go through to take a look at making choices that empowers an individual to say, I have a creative idea, and in order to make that creative idea live, I'm going to put this here, and I'm going to put this here, and then we're going to look at what those choices were. And if it inspires an individual child to go on and pursue an area in the art form technically, great. If not, I feel that something in their lives has been gained and touched just by that experience.
Certainly the creative process is what we're all involved with. And it seems to me that without the nourishment of that creative process, we are lost as individuals and we're lost as a nation, because we're looking at the documentation of a society with our arts, and we're looking at the creative product and the new idea that is going to keep us on the cutting edge, and it's healthy. So I think that we play a major role in just the nourishment of the creative process in whatever discipline that we are dealing with. And I don't say that music is the answer or that dance is whatever it is. I don't care.
No.
Just have some healthy exposure. Know that it's an empowerment thing, that we are nourishing the individual, because you come to the table with your own experiences and own ideas, and no one walks around in your head but you, and it makes you unique. And that's what's exciting, is to say, here it is, student or adult, take a look at this, let's share information, let's welcome each other into our lives, into your lives, and see what we come up with.
Explore the possibilities.
I also think that it's very important that people who are artists and people who are professionals help do this. Often as not, we let people do things in a fashion that is less than professional and less than top-notch, and you perhaps do not reach the possibilities that you could if you had a person who is demanding the very best from you. It doesn't matter whether this child will ever go to the American School of Ballet or any other ballet company or Martha Graham, it doesn't matter. But the fact that a teacher said your back should be straight and that toe should be pointed is very necessary at that moment. And that you make the policies that you give are so stringent, and so that the child really knows that this is the way we ought to do this thing. The child isn't going to say, I'm going to be a dancer. This is what the child is doing right now. And I think it's terribly important that you really do stress the professional qualities, and that people are doing the very best they can with the children. Doesn't matter where the children go from there. That's what bothers me. I don't like well, I mean, somebody comes up and says, oh, you give children arts and crafts. I say, no, we don't give children arts and crafts. They really do teach visual art in the school, and you learn how to draw, you learn how to sculpt, all these things. And I said, if a project comes up that is arts and crafts, that's fine. But they really do learn the principles of visual art and drawing and being creative about the arts. I think that's important, that you learn the very basics correctly. It doesn't matter where you're going to go from there, that's all.
I hear kind of two themes. One is that educating children in the arts is a route to the realization of their own creativity. But it's also a route to the realization that to have that creativity, you have to have discipline.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think, as a public, we think very much about the role of discipline.
Oh, we
in
don't.
the
It's
arts.
a dirty word. Work is a dirty word. I'm sorry. I think that in the 60s, in the wonderful time, we threw all that out of the window. You know, people didn't want to be hampered by those rules, and so they sort of threw everything away. The hard thing now is to make people know that in order to get anything, you have to work. And what's wrong with work? There's nothing wrong with it. But if you haven't taught people that if you don't go from here to here to here, you'll never reach here, then they're angry because they want to eventually get here, and they haven't worked through the process, knowing that whatever it is, you have to work through a process. And that's a healthy thing for a human being, an adult, to realize I must work to get a certain place. Doesn't matter what you're going to do. And so we've sort of destroyed that wonderful Judeo-Christian work ethic, which I grew up with, was if you work, you get paid. You didn't work, you didn't get paid. That's kind of how I was taught, you know. A Southern mother who said, well, if you work, you'll get so-and-so. If you don't work, you won't get so-and-so. That's maybe oversimplistic, but I still think there's nothing wrong with teaching people that you must work, and that work is a wonderful thing and a fulfilling thing in itself, and that the discipline allows you to do what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's right. I mean, the discipline is a major factor. Anything that you do well, you're going to have to work at it. And then when you reach that level that you want a little bit more, and then you start, it's exciting. I mean, the excitement does build, but I know well, and I'm certain my colleagues do too, that you get to a plateau and it's real hard to get off that plateau and to go forward. But it certainly is worth that. But if you look at sports, if you look at any kind of an activity, I mean,
anything is going to be difficult. But nobody mentions it in those terms.
No.
You see, what they do is see the result. If somebody has fine clothes, or somebody has big cars, or I think people see the results and want it immediately without going through the work process and going whatever means you're going to attain that. There has to be a way to attain that, and that unfortunately involves work.
Well, you've made a very articulate defense of the arts as a means to understand the role of discipline in one's life to achieve something. And yet, the arts are under such attack in our society.
I think it's so easy to attack them because people don't really understand it. I remember people used to say to me, well, when are you going to be through? You're studying? You're still studying? When are you going to be through? Aren't you finished yet?
When are you going to get serious about life and get married and have children?
And when are you going to get a job? When are you going to get a
Right.
job that'll pay? I don't think they have any idea, because what you do looks like fun to them. And so you're having fun all the time. You're not a serious human being. You're not working. And so they want to know, well, why don't you stop all that and get a nice, serious job? You know, be a decent human being.
To this day, having just come up from the Philadelphia Orchestra a few months ago, I would meet people in the community, and they would say, well, how much does a musician get paid in the orchestra? No, I said, it's a living wage. You don't have, is that what they do to make a living? I said, yes it is. If you put in that many hours and did that kind of work and practice to be at that level and to read and do it well, and anything put in front of you, yes, it does take a day's work to do that.
What always surprises me is if you have a conversation pretty much with any adult and say, share one memory with me from elementary school. Of course, I haven't done an official survey, but I would bet 9 out of 10 would relate a story about an arts experience.
Yes, you're right.
That's very interesting, because I grew up in New York, in the Bronx, and went to PS 70, and every Friday we went to assembly. And what was assembly but listening to classical music and learning the names? And to this day, my husband and I sometimes break out in these tunes that we learn in the school.
Did you have Dr. Spaeth's business with singing about this is the symphony that Schubert, I don't know, I can't remember that. You know, the unfinished.
Yes.
That's right. Spaeth who did that, and children all over were apparently singing tunes to Beethoven and Schubert, and he'd made up little rhymes and ditties for them to understand.
But it was my introduction to classical music,
Isn't that wonderful?
and it stayed with me. I mean, I'm a great fan of music, particularly of the opera, and it stayed with me. And yet, we know that those are the first programs to go in the public schools when we cut.
Which, of course, is very hard to reconcile those two concepts of if a meaningful experience for you as an individual, any individual, is something that came out of an arts experience, why is it that more individuals don't fight for inclusion of the arts in the lives of young people? The arts are scary. They confront. The arts are about life.
Feelings and
they make
emotions.
us feel, they make us have emotions, and
All that's scary.
all of that I think is scary.
Certainly the exposure to the arts for me was in public school. I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma, not a musical family at all, and I became involved in music through the instrumental music program in my school.
I was in school too.
And you remember those moments, and I remember going into junior high school and they needed an oboe player, so I was thrust an
You
oboe.
perforce became an oboist.
I became an oboe player, and I became a harp player because by the time I got to high school, I knew I wanted to be in music. I really did love it. I was too tall and my feet were too big to be an airline stewardess, which was going to get me out of Tulsa,
That's
Oklahoma.
terrible, really.
So I decided a musician would be the next step, and I did love it. But the reason I became a harpist was because my high school, Will Rogers High School, sold enough fruitcakes to buy a harp.
That's
And
wonderful.
there it was. And who wanted to play the harp? I wanted to play the harp because I was tired of not being able to wear lipstick playing the oboe.
Oh, how funny.
But even so, I mean, I learned repertory that way. We had a very good orchestra and a band, and we were very musically involved, and a lot of music in the church, and it just became a part of my life. And I'm so keen to see that things like that and the exposure of that sort of nature happens again and continues to happen.
I had it in, excuse me, I'm sorry. I had it in church school as well as in public school. We had what you would call a vacation Bible school.
Oh,
and
yes.
these little ladies who came from a Baptist mission school. And until one of them died a year ago, she would still write to me. And she was up in her late 80s. And she still wrote to her Betty Lou because she thought that I had a great deal of talent. Well, they did everything except dance, because dancing was that was the body doing bad things. But they taught music, and they had theater, and they had art. And so we did all that. And then when I went to the public school, there was an even greater exposure to music. And my school teachers, my homeroom teacher happened to be a lady who was a very frustrated musician. And so she would get to, our study hall became like your assembly. She would play records, whether you wanted to hear it or not. And there you sat, you were trapped, and you had to listen to her symphonic records. And so we just thought that was a part of general life. And I also grew up in a neighborhood, I told somebody the other day that was very funny. My immediate neighbors were Sicilian and Greek, and they played opera all day and all night. And everybody, we had a very motley crew. There were Serbs, there were Croats, there were Ukrainians, there were Poles, as well as the Sicilians and the Greeks. And all of that music and all of that background was sort of a part of my own background, and a knowledge that all these things were interesting, and these people brought all of their art and culture to this little bitty town with them. And so they nurtured it, and so it was a part of life. And so I thought everybody acted like that.
And this was not in New York City?
No, this was not in New York City. This was in a suburb of Youngstown, Ohio, a steel town, and everybody was there to work in the steel mills, including my father.
But why then are we taking arts out of the school? That's often the first budget that's cut. Why are the arts under such national attack? We know that we're fighting for the life of the National Endowment for the Arts. To what do you attribute this?
Well, I think it's something that that Catherine mentioned just earlier. People are afraid of the individual. If we don't conform, if we don't look alike and do alike and say alike, that's
keep it
unusual.
in control. Yeah.
And so that it's not really accepted. And the arts certainly nourish the individual to the highest level. And I think that a lot of people don't see the wonderful skills that are transferred from the arts. And we spoke earlier about discipline. How much money is spent by big business on teaching and developing their management into understanding the management of time, of crisis, of poise, of managing people and treating them as people on a very high level. And we do that in the arts from a very, very young age, because as soon as you walk out on a stage and you're in performance, you're being assessed and evaluated and judged the second that you start. And these are skills that are invaluable.
I think that so much of the thinking is compartmentalized in education, that we work with the individual on this part of their development, and then we work on this part of their development, and you know, the hardcore curriculum, and then not having anything to do with the whatever else over here, rather than thinking of the development
as being a part of the whole,
all inclusive in the whole, so that there becomes a balance. And where are we going to find our most creative scientists and computer people in the age of technology, and the ones who are the thinkers and the problem solvers of putting it together, if that kind of thinking is not nurtured in the educational environment? And the arts are inclusive of that kind of training and development.
Well, I have to say too that I think a lot of us have created have been our own worst enemies, because we've been very highly specialized. Coming out of conservatory, you know how to play what's on the printed page, but it doesn't mean that you know how to speak about it, and that you have a Renaissance knowledge to share with your audience and to welcome them into the process of understanding the shape or the form or the composer or the historical context or why it was written because of a social issue or something. And I really like to do a holistic sort of a humanities approach, so that we tie in the simple kinds of concepts that we have in each of our languages, and I look at the arts as languages, to say that if we have a basic component in music, which happens to be melody and harmony and rhythm, that you can find basic components in anything else. And if we have theme and variations in music, you can find theme and variations in anything else. So that we make connections, we make attachments, we make links that are into the other areas, so that we don't live in isolation, that we live in context. And I think a lot of our young performers and young artists need to understand that they have to go out and do a little research and do a little reading on their own and see what's going on in their city and their museums and in their libraries, in order to be a better performer, a better artist, and to share that information.
Many of the artists that work for the Lincoln Center Institute and with whom I'm in conversation with talk about how once they got interested in teaching, that the whole process of educating themselves to be able to be articulate about their art form, to communicate their ideas with children, made them a better performer.
Well, I have to interrupt this very good conversation because we're out of time. But three women in whose hands the arts in New York City are, and it gives me confidence that we're going to make progress in this area. I am afraid we're out of time. My thanks to Betty Allen, Catherine Williams, and Phyllis Susan for joining us. For the CUNY Graduate School and University Center, I'm Frances Degen Horowitz.